This is Kat Meyer. I'm the chair and sort of community manager for the Tools of Change practice area at O'Reilly. Really happy to be here today. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers, so I'm just going to say my hellos and my thank yous to our speakers and get out of the way and let them start. We've got, as Yaz mentioned, Lynette Mack from Moms with Apps and Pickpocket, Michelle Kriplani from Ocean Health, and we've also got Nat Sims from Night and Day Studios. So I know everyone who's listening is going to have tons of questions, but I can guarantee you that all of our speakers have prepared a heck of a lot of information to share with you. So we're going to go ahead, Yaz and I, and we'll be monitoring all the questions that show up in the chat window. And it helps if you put a Q in front of them. And we will try and make sure that if they don't get answered during the presentation, we can take some time at the end of the presentation and put those in front of the speakers. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Lynette Mackey from Pickpocket Books and Moms with Apps. Lynette, take it away.
Thanks so much, Kat. So I'm the founder and CEO of Pickpocket Books, which is a publisher of children's picture book apps on mobile devices. We currently have over 100 titles on iTunes, and let's get the slides going here. Our content is licensed from a number of publishers and other rights holders. We do publish a lot of out-of-print books, so when authors have the rights reverted back to them because it's gone out of print, they're often looking for a way that they can still continue to distribute their content, their artistic content to the public, and apps has been a really good way to do that in some cases. I'm also the co-founder of Moms with Apps, which is a collaborative community of over 800 developers of family-friendly content for mobile apps. I want to go ahead and introduce Moms with Apps in more detail. Of course, a lot of people have a lot of ideas for apps. I was at a conference on mobile development last week, and just about everybody in the room raised their hands just because they had an idea for an app. And the question that I often hear is, where can developers go to find resources and support and community when you're thinking about or beginning development of a mobile app? And Moms with Apps is a really fantastic resource for people who are looking to get into this business or are already in this business. It's mostly parents, but also we have some mid and large size media companies connected with Moms with Apps as well. Ocean House Media is an example, something like that. Moms with Apps was founded in 2009 by 4 moms who met over Twitter, and we currently have grown to over 800 members. We have 3 main prongs of the organization. One is our forum, our Moms with Apps forum, where we have a platform to help developers share best practices on that forum. There's a public part of the forum and that anybody can access, and there's also a members-only section of that. Specific technical questions are addressed on the members-only portion of that. They can range from anything about questions to Apple's iTunes Connect processes or specific marketing advice or really specific questions about components of an app or Apple's requirements and how long is Apple taking to review and accept apps onto the iTunes Store at any given moment. So it's pretty amazing if you are in the trenches, so to speak, of dealing with apps and questions and all the components that need to come together with that you can actually get a pretty quick answer for some very specific and detailed questions on that. Another branch of Moms with Apps is our Moms with Apps catalog, which can help parents to find appropriate apps. our catalog is a mobile app, and it really drills down to additional categories beyond what iTunes offers in the general iTunes App Store, as far as laying those categories out in more specific ways. The Moms with Apps app deals with categories like special needs and toddler categories, music education, and so forth. So not only does it help parents and educators sort through all that content that is on the App Store, but it also helps developers who are connected with Moms with Apps to reach a very highly targeted audience through that app. The app is currently catalogs about 2,200 family-friendly apps from Moms with Apps developers, and it's been downloaded 125,000 times. So we really are getting quite a reach with that. It's updated regularly with new apps from the community and updates as well. So as a developer, you really need to figure out how you're going to engage your audience and how you're going to reward your audience. So let's talk about apps and engagement with apps, through apps for a minute. On the engagement side, you can think of a spectrum ranging from content and engaging through the intellect and imagination, all the way to engaging through fine motor control and hand-eye coordination in kind of apps like Shrek Cart and Angry Birds, which you'll see over here in the lower right quadrant. Both modes of engagement are valid, but obviously different. And as a developer, this has helped me to think, I think it's important to think about which mode is better for your goals. Turning to a discussion of rewards, on the other hand, an open reward is a springboard to the real world, where the app can lead to play or conversation or learning about birds or knowing what kind of car just drove by or what constellation is in the sky. On the other hand, a closed reward system, in that case the reward would come from within the app in the form of scores or points, standings or rankings or virtual goods. So I think the point of this is that apps can encompass, there are a lot of different components and goals that you can have in an app, and as a developer, you want to be clear of where you're going with that so that you can make sure that you are targeting the audience you want to target, and that in development you're addressing those areas. Of course, with the very many options for apps that are available, this is a very general matrix here, and the lines will blur and things will cross over quite a bit. And I think that's also really important as developers continue to push the envelope and really use their imaginations and innovate to develop things that haven't even been seen yet. I was just recently reading the Common Sense Media article about additional add-ons to the mobile devices that are toys and games. And so these kind of things, like a microphone or a helicopter that is remotely controlled by the iPhone and the iPhone app. So these are the kind of things that are pushing the envelope, and I'm sure are in the future, and there are a number of or actually infinite possibilities with all of that. So back to some of the concerns or possible pitfalls within an app. Back to the idea about rewards. One of the, and closed reward system versus an open reward, one of the things that we Moms with Apps hear from educators rather frequently is that educators have a concern about some apps to use apps in an educational setting, some apps that give rewards for relatively insignificant achievements. So, for instance, that would be applause or cheering when a child pushes the correct button, but in an educational setting, some educators are really moving towards wanting to just be careful of how much reward a child gets and then start to expect for a relatively small achievement. Some of that was specifically coming from Jennifer Voorhees, who is the Early Childhood and Education Technology Specialist at Sidwell Friends School here in Washington, D.C. And they're in the process of thinking of developing their own educational apps because they're looking for something very specific. Another concern that we've heard in various articles and from experts is that the worry about encouraging and rewarding very short attention spans. That's not just in apps, of course, but that's throughout media in general. Another big question is ads, and at Moms with Apps, as family-friendly developers, a lot of us are really looking at apps, ads and apps very carefully. Of course, it can be a good revenue generator, but in general, apps in general games are okay, but are frowned upon in kids' apps, especially ones that are targeted as or marketed as educational. And certainly, educational institutions would frown generally on iAds in apps. Another concern that is important for developers to think about as they are developing their app and their platform is the question of privacy. And according to Morgan Reed, who's the executive director of ACT Online, which is an advocacy and educational organization of about 3,000 small and mid-sized app developers and IT firms, about 75% of app developers do not have a privacy policy. And it's something that really everybody who is in this space does need to look at. So I'm going to move on to talking about working with content rights holders. One thing that we have found at Pickpocket Books is that there are a lot of rights holders who are very eager for to take their content mobile, and that it's important to make sure that the content that you're considering will fit with your business and your marketing strategy and your mission. It's also the case in many instances that we've found that the idea for having an app often can come before a whole lot of research into what is an app and what that's about. We've even been approached by people who have never held a mobile device, and it's the need for basic education is definitely prevalent there in some cases. And similarly, I think that the smartphone, the user interface of the smartphone platform is rather deceptive in terms of things really just fly across the screen with a flick of a finger, and a lot of people who are thinking about development have don't necessarily start out with a realistic understanding that all features, especially any and all custom features, come with a price tag, and that's something that you definitely need to be aware of. With our contracts, of course, we always start out with a legal agreement, and it's always it's important to consider: are you going to be developing an app that you will host on your own platform and accept content from others, or are you going to be actually delivering source code and give that whole big package over to somebody to submit to the iTunes Store by themselves? As far as fees, there are a lot of different models for this. There's production fees, there's licensing fees. There's the question of, are you developing a product for a fee or for a revenue share or both? And of course, I think most people know that across the board on iTunes, Apple takes 30% of a revenue share up front, and then the rest is divided among the other parties. All of our contracts have a term, so that's how we manage that. And there's also the recognition that this space is moving very quickly, so terms are generally relatively brief compared to traditional publishing, print publishing space. Some authors are used to a much longer term of the contract. And another factor to consider with that is what rights are you contracting? Is it just for mobile apps, or is it across the board? Is the author still free to publish print books, make T-shirts, do a radio show, etc.? So we were also asked by O'Reilly to provide some of our top tips or business tools that we use as app developers. And I'm going to just quickly go over my list here so we can move on to Michelle and Ocean House's words of wisdom. But as far as marketing, social media is key for us. It's a great place to reach the audience really already hanging out on social media with their mobile devices. We find that it's necessary to have really an ongoing conversation, and it's also part of the beauty of these mobile devices and social media that it can be a multi-way conversation, and really a pretty constant conversation too. So the three prongs of social media that we use are Twitter and a Facebook page and a YouTube channel. Those are really the main ones. I also turn to moms with apps very heavily, looking at the forum for any specific questions that I have that come up, and also can get significant marketing support from that community. App Annie is what I use to track stats, so you can get downloads and rankings on that. And another prong of my marketing is, of course, the app reviews that we pursue through review sites and mom bloggers and super bloggers, and also, of course, the reviews and ratings in iTunes. Moms with Apps has an event every Friday where certain apps are promoted, and that has really helped a lot of the developers see their apps soar to the top of the charts through App Friday. Very frequently we see them climb to the top 10 or 20. So real kudos to Lorraine Ackerman for heading that up and her boundless energy that has really made a huge difference for a lot of these smaller mom and pop outfits who are, really looking to get noticed in that vast scene. And then finally, in-app cross-marketing is another thing that we do to help spread the word, where we cross-reference our other, the rest of our library at the end of our apps. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead on to the next slide, and Michelle, you'll get to take over.
Sounds great. Thank you, Lynette. All right, so let me see. Obviously, this is a challenging space. It's been about 3 years now, really, for the apps market. Let me run in. I like starting with a couple of stats just so we can kind of position it. Projected sales for the iPad this quarter alone are going to be 13 million units. It's interesting to note that the Amazon Kindle Fire, which just launched, is expected to sell 5 million units in its first quarter. It doesn't sound like that much compared to the iPad, but at 5 million units, that'll actually be more units than the iPad sold in its first quarter. So Amazon's coming on big and Android's coming on big. If you add iOS and Android together, there are 1 million new device activations per day. So it's absolutely a massive opportunity that we're looking at here. Ocean House Media is best known for the Dr. Seuss line of titles that we've produced. We've been doing Dr. Seuss titles for about 2 years, and thought it would really be good to start with some stats on that so you have some context for what I'm talking about. We've released 26 ebooks out of the classic Dr. Seuss line. 11 of those books have reached the #1 spot in the books category, and 4 of the apps have actually gotten onto the top 100 of the App Store overall. For children's books, that's quite tough. The top 100 is really dominated by games primarily. So, the majority of our apps live here. What we're finding is that children's books, illustrated, interactive children's books, don't really have a good home either on Kindles because of the black and white screen, or we would argue even in the traditional books category of the iBooks. There's just not enough interactivity there. So what we're finding is that a lot of children's books are just swarming into the books category. On this particular day, I think out of the top 25 books overall, 20 or so were children's books. I think we probably had about 4 or 5 from that screenshot. What's interesting about Ocean House Media is we do more than just electronic books. We also do games. I come from a games background. I ran a games studio for 11 years. So here you can see we take some of the major Dr. Seuss books and we actually create games from them. We do this for a number of reasons. One of them is cross-promo. It just gives us a way to expand the audience. Also, the games market can give you more volume and can just bring customers in. In general, we find that games can outsell books by a factor of about 20 or 30 to 1. And the only difference there is that they're a lot cheaper. Primarily, games really need to be living in 99-cent land and take a real amount of development. So the ROI can be tough. From a marketing standpoint, really one supports the other, and I'll touch on it a little bit, but visibility in this space is just really, really tough. When I got into this business, there was 10,000 apps in the App Store, and I wondered if I had already missed the boat, and now now there's 500,000 apps in the App Store, so it's pretty amazing. What we are doing with the Dr. Seuss line is we're embarking on a full app strategy. So here you can see we've got books, we've got cameras, we've got games, we have card decks. Actually, just today we released a musical instrument called Dr. Seuss Band, and we anticipate that over the first 3 to 4 years of the life of our deal, we will probably publish 60 to 80 Dr. Seuss-themed apps. This is part of our overall strategy. We do more than just Dr. Seuss. Ocean House Media has released 200 apps in under 3 years. That's just on iOS. And then we also have Android and WebOS on top of that. So with all the competition that I'm talking about, the real question is it worth it? And, from our perspective, yes, it absolutely is. In 2010, the market was $6.8 billion, but by 2015, the projected app revenue is going to be $25 billion. So it's definitely very significant. So, like I said, we started with Dr. Seuss. We founded the business 3 years ago in January of 2009. In December of that year, we introduced the Grinch. It's exactly 2 years ago this month. By February, we had released Cat in the Hat and ABC, and it was in early 2010 that Apple really surprised us. We had no idea that the iPad was coming, and thankfully we were able to get 4 apps out on the day that the iPad launched. It's really important to own your technology, and one thing I often say is Ocean House Media is really a software company first, and a children's publishing company second, and we have really fantastic engineers, and one of the things they're able to do is make sure we're always ahead of the curve, and that's why we were able to get where we got on the iPad as fast as we did. I think it's important to talk a little bit about design intent. A lot of people want to be in the app business, but they don't know exactly what that means. What exactly are you trying to create? A lot of times people want to throw the kitchen sink at apps. And, we ask ourselves what needs to be in an app as well as what does not belong in an app. Our goal with the Dr. Seuss apps was really to be as true to the original books as possible. What Ted was doing is he was trying to give the basics of literacy to kids, to teach them how to read. And so we decided that absolutely had to be our filter for everything that was going in. So every feature that we would come up with as we were thinking about what would go in the app, we basically said, is this going to help a child learn how to read? And if the answer was no, it ended up on the cutting room floor. So, I don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to go into all the individual features, but if you get a chance to download the apps, you'll see that everything from, word recognition and tapping individual words and tapping pictures and having words come up, it's all about having the child learn. We made a conscious decision not to have the cat, dancing as you touch on it, or the hat flip up and do, whirls up in the, dance around just for entertainment value. Our guiding principle was education, and that's just absolutely what we focused on. I do think it is worth talking a little bit about pricing, because a lot of people get really hung up on pricing in the App Store, and it's just one of those things where you have to understand that in the world of apps, these low prices are just what's absolutely expected. I've got a slide here that compares the price of Green Eggs and Ham as an app to Green Eggs and Ham as a book, and the bottom one on Amazon is $8.99 hardcover dead tree product. And what's interesting about it is you have all the educational value that was there in the original printed book, but it doesn't read to you. It can't read to the child when mom and dad is not available. You can't touch on any individual word and hear that word spoken. It hasn't got a soundtrack. It doesn't have all the sound effects. And at the end of the day, it's still double the price. And I apologize for that. It's the reason the graphic didn't come across is from a Mac over the PowerPoint, but you can see $3.99 to $8.99, and where you make it up in the app stores, you make it up in volume. I mean, you just have this ability to immediately sell in 100+ countries, and it's really obvious to see all the cost of goods is gone, the inventory is gone, the sales channel in terms of personnel, it's all gone, and you really can make it back in volume as long as you have the right apps. Now, from OHM's perspective, all of our deals are licenses. Of the 200 apps that we've shipped, we only have one that's an original property, and it's the very first title that we did, and it was just our first volley to see if the App Store was going to work. So we followed with 199 titles that are all based on high-value licensed brands. You can see here whether it's Dr. Seuss or Berenstain Bears or the Smithsonian, Little Critter. We focus on brands that we feel are going to be really strong and are going to get that recognition. And this is one of the ways that we fight the visibility problem. A lot of people really complain that it's hard to get apps found in the App Store, and it's true. And we think that brands is one of the key parts to a strong brand is one of the key parts to having people find your app in the first place. If you're curious how we manage that as a global publishing company, from the umbrella, what we do is we use this blue wave wrapper around everything, and then we put the sub-brands in the lower left-hand corner there, so you can see whether it's Five Little Monkeys or Little Critter or Dr. Seuss. They all have their mark. So someone that's looking to collect all of the Little Critter apps is able to recognize what those are, for example. Just thought that might be interesting for people to see what we do. And then what we also do is we focus on awareness so that people know that what we're doing may be different than what our competitors are doing. And we've trademarked Ohm Book, and this is for an Ocean House Media digital book, and you know that if you're buying an Ohm Book, you have a mark of quality, and you know the feature set that's going to be in there, and we just think that this is a way for us to differentiate ourselves from our competitors. Just in children's illustrated books alone now, I think we've completed perhaps 80 or 90 of them. And then finally, I was asked to wrap up on a couple of tips for success, and these are the ones that I pulled. I talked about strong brands. This really is what is going to help you get the apps found in the App Store in the first place. A large app catalog, I believe, is critical. A single app in the App Store can be a really, really lonely thing. You have to find a way to cross-promote between the apps. Fantastic engineering is, again, critical. I said that I come from a game background, and a lot of the engineers that I've got have 20-plus years of experience, and you've got to find a way to rework all of the investment that you're making in the engine across a number of titles. It can be really, really expensive to put a lot of engineering into a single title. It's hard to get the ROI back. I believe that app diversity is important. I think if you focus just in one area of the catalog, you're kind of missing. So whether it's books or games or music, we really are looking to do a lot of that. And then the last one, which is really the crazy one, is nimbleness. I would say that we are reinventing our business and reinventing our business plan about once every 3 or 4 months. And that's just become standard for us. The market is changing that fast, and if you're not nimble, it's a really, really tough place to be. So I want to pass it off to Nap, but you'll find my information there. And thank you again for having me be part of this conversation.
Well, thanks, Michelle. I am queuing up my first slide. I'm Matt Sims from Night and Day Studios, and yeah, I'm seeing some funny graphics too. We've been app publishers for 3 years and kind of backed into doing kids apps. So I made one for my daughter named Peekaboo Barn, and that kicked off a long series of children's apps that we've been working on. But we create educational games for mobile devices, not just iPhone, but iPad, of course, and Android devices, and I'm sure that will eventually turn into Nook and Fire and Navi and so on. But our bestseller, Peekaboo Barn, has been a top 20 educational game for, it will be 3 years come December 23rd. And we know from watching how it does, it's been played nearly 20 million times. So it's definitely been a hit with little kids for a while. And it got us started. We've published about 30 kids apps since then. We've done another 20 apps for partners and other developers. So we're actually working on our 51st app right now. So what do we do? Just like Ocean House, we got interested in licensing early on for the same reason that the problem of visibility in the App Store is almost crushing. And I think it's harder and harder for new developers to be able to break in. And we started about 2 years ago looking into licensing major illustrators, children's book illustrators. The top children's book illustrator in the world, of course, is Dr. Seuss, and good job for Ocean House. So we have number 2 and number 3. So we were working with Richard Scarry, who created Busy Town series, and Eric Carle, who created The Very Hungry Caterpillar and Brown Bear and my very first books. We also got interested in licensing content from television shows. We did a couple of projects with Nick Jr. a few years ago. And since then, we've licensed Yo Gabba Gabba and also Caillou, which is on PBS. And what's exciting about doing licensing for us is the access to great content and also, like I said, the visibility of the brand. So people who are trying to find their way through the App Store, we have that added chance that they'll find us because they're looking for brand-related content. They might be looking for TV shows on the iTunes Store, or they might be just interested in the brand and looking for a game. But all of those things help lift your one app out of the 500,000 other apps that are out there. That's the biggest challenge, and I think that a lot of times when indie developers are starting out, they're hoping that the iTunes Store, the App Store itself, will help them with marketing because, oh, will people find my app, it will be well ranked, but it's usually just not the case because it's such an uphill battle. So finding other ways to be seen is a major part of the game, as that's what I would be focusing on today. We do things the hard way. We have illustrators and animators. There's 20 of us at 9 Day Studios. And when we work with licensed brands, we might be working with the artwork of Eric Carl, but it's never been animated before. So we have to take his artwork and bring it alive and create music and record voiceovers, translate it into other languages, and, of course, invent games that use that art and is respectful to the original license. And that's the challenge. It's a fun challenge. It can be very difficult. So one thing to be aware of when you go into licensing is your relationship with your licensor is going to be really important. They're not really a client, but they're not really a partner. So it's somewhere in between where you want them to be happy, and, of course, you want to be happy with what you're able to do with the license. So I would advise people who are going into licensing to look at if they have anybody else they can talk to in the industry and they can find out anything about the licensor and the sort of how strict they are on brand management versus how open they are, how much support they can provide in terms of marketing and providing materials. All of those things are very valuable for companies that are getting started. When we look at the market, and I'm just going to reiterate quickly some of the figures that Michelle went over, there's a ton of devices, and there's more every day. So that's exciting. The market is growing super fast. I have an even more optimistic projection than Michelle. And so somewhere in the $25 to $35 billion range within the next 3 years. And that's getting to be a very big market, and that's getting to be exciting. Somebody recently told me that the size of the Google ad market is $75 billion. So still not that big, but it's getting up there into interesting territory. The problem is parents are looking for great educational software, and can we deliver it, and can we help them find it? Those are the two questions that we spend all our time thinking about. Can we do something that's great, that we feel good about, that the parents will feel good about, that actually provides value for children, and can it be found? Certainly there's a lot of money being spent on getting kids ready for school, and a lot of our apps are focused on preschool and kindergartners. And at that age, we're hopefully providing some supplemental education to what they're getting in preschool. And we definitely try to provide some value in our apps beyond just play, as what Matt was describing. So one solution for us is brands. Recognizability is great for people, and the other thing that we've been focused on is building our own brand so that people can know that they trust 9 Day Studios, and they like what we're doing, and then they may come back to us for something in the future. So as you're building an app, working with a brand, if it's not your own brand, you also have to remember that you are building your own brand at the same time. So you want to, one way that we always reassure licensors and partners that we're committed is that, of course, everything we do reflects back on what we're able to do and what we're going to do next. So it's important to keep in mind. Let's see. We love making games, and I guess you can call them software toys. Some of our apps, like Peekaboo Barn's not really a game. You can't lose, but it's fun to play with, and you pick up some interesting content along the way. And for little kids, the content might be the sound that a pig makes and the name of the pig. But for older kids, you start to get into vocabulary, math, and other skills that will translate into the classroom later. The other thing that we really want to focus on is, why is it an iPad app or an iPhone app instead of a book? Is there something that we're doing on the device that makes it worth redoing? Is there a reason that we're leaving paper behind? And we all love books. And so we're trying to make sure that there's a point to it being an app and it's not just a PDF on the screen. I think that's something that all three of us here share, that interest in making sure that there's more to it. And finally, this is something that you'll hear directly from Apple as well. Focus on a delightful experience. Make something that people love, that they want to come back to. The fact that Peekaboo Barn is played an average of 60 times per user, that means that somebody is coming back and enjoying it. That somebody might be a little kid, but it's great if you can get that engagement from somebody, then that's going to turn into word of mouth. I'll come back to that in a second. It is very challenging to build your own brand. We got lucky with Peekaboo Barn. We were in there very early. It's definitely risky to build your own brand. If you're not building your own brand, try to do something new with the brand that you're licensing. Either way, you want to find a way to set yourself apart. The last thing that I think is really important for indie developers to remember as they're coming is that everybody's thinking about the products that they want to do and the great idea they have and the beautiful art that they're creating. But you also have to remember that you're designing a business. And so you have to build a support system for this project that you're doing. This might be a totally obvious point, but over and over again, people will have a great idea for an app but have no way of really making the company that can make that app and continue into the future. So you'll see an app appear, and then that company will never reappear in the App Store ever again. And it means that you have to be, even though you fall in love with your work, you also have to be a little dispassionate. You have to have another side of your brain that's looking at this as a business problem and make sure that you can actually afford to support this and afford to go forward. And if you don't have any background in business, make sure that you talk to people who do. I think that we, as Night and Day Studios, grew over time. It was very organic for us, and we made a lot of mistakes along the way. And one of the best things that ever happened to us was to put together a board of advisors that was really serious about helping our business become something that could last. So make sure you put some energy into that too. Licenses. I'll try to be kind of quick about this. This is a very complicated subject, and as Aaron, my co-founder, and I got into licensing, it was a very, very steep learning curve. There was tons of jargon being thrown around, MGs, advances, recoupable, escalators, and it can be really daunting. And you can get trapped into a really complicated and disadvantageous agreement with a licenser. So make sure that somebody who knows what they're doing helps you out with the agreement that you sign. I think that's really important. And make sure that the expectations of the licenser are realistic. If they're thinking, oh, well, it's an app, you're going to make $1 million, and we want half of that. Make sure that you really think that through, because you don't want to commit to delivering that if you can't do it. Also, of course, make sure that the brand is something that's going to resonate with your target audience. And your target audience, I'll come back to this in a second, but it's people with iPhones. It's not everybody, and it's parents. It's not everybody with iPhones, and then it's really the kids of those parents that you really want to please. So you have to make sure that the brand you're excited about is going to go somewhere. And you could do that sort of anecdotally by talking to people, or you can actually do a small research project. But definitely try to test your assumptions as quickly as you can and as inexpensively as you can. I also just, last but not least, like I said before, if you're building your own brand, it's a very risky process. We are always working on it. We're excited to build our own brand, but it's much harder. And so you're really going to need to be ready to batten down the hatches as you work on that. Who are your customers? I was just talking about this. You hope the kids are playing your games and loving them, but the parents make the decision. And this is something that has been going on for decades in marketing to parents. So we always like to tell the story of how baby food used to be full of sugar and salt because it tasted good to parents, and they were the ones who decided whether to buy it. It's not actually good for the kids. And so we have often been trying to decide between, well, we want to appeal to parents and make it something that they understand. But to be honest, the way that kids play with iPads today, it's amazing. They're more advanced than our own developers. And just try this sometime. If you show Peekaboo Barn to a parent who's never seen it before, they'll have no idea what to do. If you show it to a kid, they'll immediately tap the barn and it will open and there'll be a dog inside. And that is a tricky balance. They are contradictory design goals often to please parents, make them feel good about what they're buying, but at the same time make something that actually works for kids and that kids want to spend time with. So again, test your assumptions. Okay, so here's my 5 tips. And this is, I'm trying to sort of wrap up a little bit of what Matt and Michelle were saying and also just what we've learned the hard way. So obviously make your games great. Make something that you love. Don't be too cynical about it. Don't do everything by the numbers. Take a chance, but also see if people actually love them, especially kids. Stick to your guns. What I'm saying there is don't give up, obviously, and try to do something exciting, and then take it all the way, make it great, and use that to build your business. Find great partners. I can't stress this enough. No one's going to make it alone in the App Store this coming year. It's really hard to get started if you're just getting started, and partners there are many partners. There are many resources out there. I think Moms with Apps is a great resource. You could partner with a company like Fingerprint that's helping tie together a network of apps and give parents a sense of what their kids are playing. You can develop a relationship with bloggers and the press, find technology partners. We've been working with ANSCA using their Corona SDK, and having partners who are helping us with technology and are there to answer questions is amazing. Apple is often hidden behind the Wizard of Oz's curtain, and so you can't ask them questions. So find people you can ask. Make relationships with other developers in your community, in your town, or online. And like I said before, find advisors for your business. So, number 4, design your business, not just your apps. Make sure that you have a way to continue. Once you make a great product, you want to be able to support it and come out with a sequel. And last but not least, test often. Fail faster is something from Merlin, but it's the idea that if it's broken and it's not going anywhere, don't beat a dead horse. So I know I said stick to your guns, but if you test an app that you love the idea but no one gets it, don't go all the way with that app. Just give up and move on, and improve a little every day. And what I mean by that is notice what's working in your business, notice what's working for your customers, and keep chipping away at that and keep getting better, and you will get there. I have a little overview of talking about what games are, but it's a bit of a digression. Kat, do you want me to just skip that and go to Q&A, or?
If you can go through it a little bit quickly. We've got a ton of great questions. A lot of them have been sort of answered in what you guys have been talking about. It would be great to pull them out and just point to them. So if you can just do a really quick wrap up with this one, I think we should be okay. We've got about 10 minutes.
Okay, I will just whip through this. This is just from a talk I gave recently about what are games, and are games actually educational? I'll just be very quick. I think it is interesting to compare electronic books to games and what are the advantages, and I think for a lot of parents they're wondering, well, is it just a game? What's the value in a game? And to me, what's exciting about a game is that it teaches you some real world skills. And I really like what Lynette was saying about open-ended rewards. I call those, extrinsic rewards. Intrinsic rewards. You want there to be something that comes out of the play that translates into the rest of the child's life. You don't want it to just be, hey, I got a high score, and that's it. So you're hoping that as you engage with a game, that you're working on things that are developing skills. And just very quickly, some of the skills that games can develop for children include abstraction, which is fundamental for mastering reason, pattern recognition, symbol processing, and so these are things that they build the skills that turn into reading and math skills later. This is more fundamental. You could also literally have math skills and word skills for an older child. overlooked but interesting is that people who play games really develop a certain kind of concentration skill that I think is often laughed at, but it's really amazing when you watch somebody really get into a game. That is a good practice, practicing concentration. Of course, you can do more complicated things like resource management. And with a great brand, you can see amazing engagement with a game where people will just dive into it, and you'll be surprised by a child that knows the name of every Pokemon character. And I'll just take a quick whack at Math Blaster. I think that there are games where there's really there's not much to the game, so that it's a little bit arbitrary. Why are you using math to blow up asteroids? No one knows. And at the end of the game, okay, I practiced some math, but I got a high score, and that was kind of it. Versus a game where, as you play the game, it makes sense what you're getting out of the game. It goes somewhere. It's all one world where your rewards are tied to your activity, and it all makes sense. And those are the things that translate into real-world skills. My favorite board game, of course, is Settlers of Catan. But the point of all of this is that we want to make things that are beautiful, that are engaging, and that the rewards for children come out of the activity and are connected to the rest of their lives, so that they're not just sitting there playing video games, but that they're developing the skills they need to be citizens and students and great human beings. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Nat. And I know that I tried to put you on the spot there. I do think that the gaming issue is really important, and I know that you will be speaking at Tools of Change in New York, and we'll probably be covering that as well. So I'd encourage anybody who can come out to come to TOC New York in February, and Nat will probably have a lot more to offer on that particular subject. I'm going to jump into some of the yeah, a little plug, but it is true. We have a few questions that are really tech heavy, and we've got a bunch that are more on the general side. So I'm just going to randomly grab them, and one that I think is something a lot of people will be interested in relates to licensing, and asking specifically to Michelle, how did you get those great partnerships and those great licensing deals that you have, and is that something that a brand new indie developer could expect to accomplish?
You know, at the time we were actually brand new indie developers ourselves. I had experience. This is my third business, and I had worked with licenses in the past. Really, I was just able to get an introduction. I was able to get a phone call with the president of Dr. Seuss Enterprises, and then the rest of it was just, demos and presentations and talking, and I mean, it was just all your normal sales skills. It wasn't anything fancier than that. We were thankful that we were able to get the introduction, and the rest of it we just had to run with. I did go into that demo. I will mention I did go into that meeting with a full working prototype. I didn't have it was like, this is what we can do for you, and I showed them the full app. So, you have to, if you're going for something big, you got to ask yourself how much you're willing to commit to it to land it.
That's good advice. Nat, do you have any advice in that direction?
I think that what Michelle did and what he's saying is brilliant about coming with a demo. It's been great for us to have other apps to point to, or when we've been able to develop an app that really uses the brand itself. And yeah, don't be afraid to call people and ask questions. You have to remember that licensors are trying to make money, and they're actually salespeople. So they will be interested in talking to you if you can show them that you can do something successful with their brand.
Super. Okay, well, another question that is a little bit loaded here. What's a reasonable budget range for creating an app?
I'll jump in and I'll say it's actually impossible to say. I mean, the range is so wide, and it depends on the features that are going to be included.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of true. It's sort of like how much is a house? It depends a lot of things, right? How big and where is it? But for anyone that's just looking for rough numbers, I can tell you it's pretty tough to do anything interesting and original for less than $5-10 grand, and certainly at the high end when you're doing really, really custom stuff, it can be many tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that no app costs less than $10,000. Basically, once you consider testing and marketing, it's just like anytime you fly anywhere, there's always a certain amount of time you spend on the runway, no matter how long you are in the air. And so you can make a very expensive app that's $250,000, but there's always going to be a part of the process which is figuring out what you're going to do and putting the team together and testing what you've done, getting it in the store that sets a minimum price on it unless you do things overseas, which is the headache of itself, and we've never done that actually.
And the one thing that's an interesting trend is that the costs are escalating, right? Because the competitive nature of what you have to put out in order to even, chart anymore, you have to be that much more invested in each app.
That's right.
Well,
So
to go back to what both Michelle and Nat pointed out in their presentations is that, you're going to really want to consider very carefully if you're going to do that for a one-off app. And if you're investing in a platform that you'll be able to reuse and bring kind of different iterations of content to that, or publish a sequel, that is something that is going to be much more viable. Because you have to remember, if you're spending $10,000 or $20,000 on an app in development, look at the iTunes App Store. How much are those apps selling for, and how many downloads does that mean that you need to realize before you can even think about your return on your investment?
Yeah, that's a good point, and we actually had a question, I think that was answered by you guys, which was, what is the trend in development costs? And while some people might say it's going down, it sounds like it's not. I have one more question. We've only got time for about one more question, which is unfortunate. We're going to have to do a part 2, I think, on this one. Really, really great, you guys. Very much appreciated. I just want to say that if I ran out of time, you did a great job, so thank you. So for our last question, I'm going to ask something that sounds like it's on a lot of people's minds. What's the deal with iOS versus Android? And is anybody in the development world seeing higher revenue coming from investments in Android apps yet?
I don't know about the other speakers. This is Michelle. We are on Android. We've been on Android for a year now. I can tell you that when we started, revenue was low, but it's been escalating at a pretty good pace, and the Amazon Kindle Fire, I think, really gets things really interesting. I mean, that's certainly going to be the number 2 tablet in the market, just a couple months from now. So, we're heavily invested in both. Everything we do in the children's space, we do on both devices. That said, we're making money on iOS right now, and Android is just kind of a long investment for us.
Michelle, are the apps, DOM apps on Android priced the same as their counterparts on iOS?
They are. Yeah, we do have price parity.
I'm sorry, did you have any experience or anything to offer on that particular point? I think that it is actually.
I would echo Michelle in general that the profitability right now is on iOS. We see that our customers have been better trained to spend money if they're an iOS customer. And I think that's going to be a nice thing about some of the more private marketplaces on the Android side, like the Kindles, that those are people who are used to spending money on their tablet, and so the kind of customer that you get is willing to spend a little bit more. There's a huge number of Android devices out there, but many of the Android users are looking for free content at the moment. Has been our experience. So it's definitely been more profitable in the short term to be on iOS, but we have also committed to the platform and are doing price parity and publishing parity for all of our apps from now on.
Okay, great. Well, we're at the end of the hour, and I don't want to keep anybody too long, especially Michelle, who we appreciate us being here with us when he's on vacation. So big shout out to you for that. And I do also want to mention that this will be archived. We'll have the webcast and recording and slides up on the O'Reilly site probably a week and a half or 2. So check back there if anybody is interested in reviewing this. And thanks, guys. Thanks very, very much. Have a great holiday if I don't talk to you. And thank everybody in the audience for joining us. Really appreciate it.